welcome to one of the proudest moments of the Shepaug year. Please join me in welcoming our chorus as they will sing for us. As I said, this morning is one of the proudest of the moments that we share together as a Shepaug learning community. It's a very special thing to examine Memorial Day and its true meaning. It's a very special thing to examine our own part in our own Memorial Days. And this always calls us to examine our guiding beliefs and our core values. One of my favorite of our guiding beliefs is learning requires courage. That takes on a lot of meaning for a lot of people. Let's think for a moment about what that meant to Stephen Reich. Applying for West Point is not the easiest thing to do. Yes, it's challenging, and it should be. Yes, you have to be very, very smart, and you should be. But you also must possess in yourself a call to citizenship and to leadership. Stephen Reich knew that by going to West Point, he was committing himself to a life that had danger, but that had honor, and that had a great deal of courage. When others were playing ball, he was making the decision to leave the ball field to serve his country. When others were making the decision to do things that were fun for them, he was making the decision to do things for others. Learning requires courage. It requires courage to go to an atmosphere that you know is training you for a life of uncertainty. It takes courage to know that you are giving up a part of your life for the greater good. The best thing that you can do today to honor Stephen Reich is to examine yourselves. I don't expect you to be where Stephen Reich was right now. No one should expect that of you. But I respect you as learners, and I respect you as people. And that gives me the confidence to say, examine yourselves today. How have you answered your calls to citizenship? How do you do that in your family, in your homes, with your friends, and as a part of the Shepaug learning community? That's not a finite answer. It goes on. as school goes on. And even for our seniors, it goes on as you head off to college or the work world or the military. Those decisions continue to be made day after day after day. And the good days are the ones when you make the decisions that make you feel proud. I wish I could have known Stephen Reich, although I feel that I do after doing these assemblies each year. Each year when I look at this slideshow, sorry, it's a PowerPoint showing my age. Each year as I look at the pictures of Stephen, I think, what a great guy he looks like. I love the picture of him with his arms out like this, big smile on his face. I have a feeling he had that look on his face a lot. See, I do know him a little. I have a feeling when I look at those pictures that he would just about try anything. That courage extended even to casual occasions. That's probably why you saw him with a bungee cord. Something that I can promise you will never see on me. That's probably why you saw him in those pictures that just showed a joy in living, a joy in being part of teams, which is part of where his leadership came from. And those of you in uniform know that. Pictures of him enjoying his life, living it to the fullest, and making me proud to know that he was a Shepaug graduate. I take no credit, but I love the fact that this learning community produced this man. I love the fact that I get to know his family. His family could have done a lot of things after he was killed. It would be very easy to stay at home, to celebrate among the people that you love, and to not revisit that pain. But learning requires courage. And his family knew that this was an opportunity to serve as their son had done. So they created these events. They created events in town, and they share their son with you each year. That's not an easy thing to do, but it's an amazingly special thing to do. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the courage of the person who arranged this. Mr. Werkoven has suffered personal loss. It would have been easy for him to say, Mrs. Gallo, you need to do this year. I can't do it. That was never a consideration. He still chose to honor his friend and to teach all of you. Learning requires courage. So as you examine yourselves today, be proud to be a part of the learning community that produced Stephen Reich. Be proud to be who you are, and remember that your courage and your citizenship can affect our world in very positive ways. As a matter of fact, I'm sure it already has. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim, and welcome to what is now the 9th Stephen Reich Memorial Award presentation, where we will recognize an outstanding individual who has demonstrated character, service, leadership, and achievement while here at Shepaug. It is again my honor and my small part in this ceremony to introduce our guest speaker, but as always, before I do so, I'd like to recognize a few people that are here with us, special guests, members of Stephen's family. And there's a few people, so I'm going to ask that we just hold our applause until the end. First, I'd like to welcome members of the community, those that have come out, some each and every year, and especially our veterans that are here with us today. Past recipients, Allie Morawski, Kate DeWitt, and Ethan LaBella. Stephen's classmates, Leah Glow Smith, Michael Condon, and of course, Coach Scott Werkoven. Committee members, including our latest addition, Wendy Youngblood, who already brings a tremendous amount of support, energy, and insight to our committee. Past guest speakers, Drew Barkowitz, former Shepaug alum, West Point alum, Mike Gora, Shepaug alum, and of course our very own Norm Cummings. We also have a couple coaches from the Berkshire League who have decided to come today. In the past year, they came up on their own. We have a Pitcher of the Year award amongst the Berkshire League coaches, and each year the outstanding pitcher receives that award and accolade. This past year, they got together and decided to name the award in Stephen's honor. And Greg Hunt, Wamogo head coach, and Bobby McMahon, head coach at Thomaston, are with us today, and we appreciate them bestowing that honor upon the Pitcher of the Year in the Berkshire League. Sherry Vogt, who is not only an Army vet, she is a Veterans District Aide for Congressman Esty, and she is representing Congressman Esty today. The Shepaug faculty and students, we always appreciate this time that you give us. And I always say it's easy to forget. For the freshmen, it's your first time maybe seeing that slideshow, hearing the Stephen Reich story. You're going to go through a lot of ups and downs here, hopefully more ups. You probably passed that glass case out there with Stephen's mementos and his uniform and awards and pictures. And I think I said the first year up here, and I probably haven't said it since. When you're going through some of those adversities, whether it be on the ball field, in the classroom, maybe on this stage performing, not having maybe the best of day, maybe go to that glass case and gather strength. He's someone who walked the very halls that you did and assumed some of the same positions you did. So we welcome you guys here. And obviously the Shepaug chorus, you guys always add a tremendous amount to this ceremony, and we appreciate that. I don't think I've left anybody out here. And I just want to obviously mention, once again, Mr. and Mrs. Riker here, Stephen's sister, Megan, sister Anne Marie with her 3 boys, Zachary, Stephen, and William. So, welcome everybody. Our special guest, originally from Schenectady, New York, Colonel Mike Hertzendorf is a 1989 graduate of Ithaca College, holding a business administration degree. He would go on to obtain his master's degree in public administration from Murray State and another master's degree in the National Security Studies from the U.S. Army War College. He is married to his wife, Andrea, of 20 years, and they have 4 children. He is a career Army aviation officer with over 25 years of service, with 18 of those coming in the special operations. He has been both stationed in the United States and abroad and has multiple combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. The regiment, the 160 Special Operations Aviation Regiment, also known as the Night Stalkers, is a special operations force that provides helicopter aviation support to the general forces and special forces. They usually operate at night, and they're known for their ability to go anywhere, any place, anytime in the most dangerous of conflicts. Since the unit's inception in the early 1980s, they have been involved in many notorious missions, some of which we obviously don't know about, but some including the 1993 battle at Mogadishu, which later became the infamous Black Hawk Down film, multiple missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they provided cover and insert for the raid on Osama bin Laden, just to name a few. It is extremely my honor, and we're very proud to have with us the gentleman who will be taking over command of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment next month. Please welcome Colonel Mike Hertzendorf.
Pry this apart. Am I working? Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me today. I'd like to just recognize a few folks. Thank you very much. In the audience, we have a Gold Star mom, in addition to the Reich family. Gold Star is somebody who's lost a loved one in combat. We have Miss Helen Peterson Keel. Where are you at, Miss Helen? Thank you very much. Her son was killed in Afghanistan a year ago. Our heart goes out to you. Number of veterans. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. Ma'am, it's great to have veterans here. Special thank to Mike and Scott for putting this on in memory of Steve and remembering him every year. Really a great honor. To the principal, Kim Gallo, the choir, the band, behind the scenes, all the faculty, staff, and community. It's great that you remember Memorial Day in this way, and most of all to the students. I know there's a lot going on as you get ready to graduate for the seniors, the end of school, and the fact that you take your time out to remember Memorial Day and those who served is a great honor. I wish I grew up in Washington, Connecticut. And I'd like to be the first to congratulate the future winner of the Reich Award, have something named after you in memory of Steve Reich. That is truly an honor. Steve was a special person. I'll talk a little bit about the 4 years that I knew him in our time in Afghanistan and Iraq. And then obviously most importantly to my other parents, Ray, and, Sue Reich, and then Megan and Anne-Marie, thank you very much for having me here today. Typically a military speech, we're a formal bunch, and I would stand behind the podium and I would read a set script, and y'all eyes would probably glaze over, and that would be my cue to get off. So I'm going to try to, one of those keys to public speaking is to be a little bit more engaging to your audience here, so I'm going to try not to bore you today. All right, that was my attempt at humor. All right, so now you can laugh, and it's okay to laugh. If you looked at those slides up there, Steve Reich had a smile and a laugh. It was like a Cheshire cat that would just light up the room. You could never be in a bad mood when you were around Steve. That was a trademark smile. So one of the ways I started thinking about what I wanted to say to here was, remember Steve. And definitely it was that smile and that laugh that would light up a room. The other key to a good public speech is to be able to engage your audience. So I thought about, okay, if I was in high school, and I was glad that I probably wasn't sitting in class. I'd rather be sitting here in the audience. So what would I want to hear? And I figured I was just going to tell you a little bit about the 4 years and what it was like after 9/11 and those first couple of years in Afghanistan. Now, Steve was a very special friend of mine, as I'm sure Scott and Mike and anybody here who knew him would say the same thing. Steve had a special way of instantly bonding with you and making you feel special, and that was definitely one of his greatest qualities. The Army and the military in general, we're about people, and we're a leadership organization. And the reason Steve was such a great leader, he was just natural. He was a natural leader, and he engaged people, and you wanted to be around him, and you wanted to be his friend, and he made you feel special, and he had a way of connecting individually with every person that he ever met. I first met Steve in the summer of 2001. We were both stationed with, as Mike said, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Steve was the personnel officer, and I was the operations officer. A little bit about the unit, just for your understanding. So we fly helicopters. We fly them in the most demanding, most challenging environments, anywhere that our nation asks us to go. Now, what makes us special is not that we fly helicopters. It's that we get to support great special forces, great Navy SEALs, great Army Rangers, and it's special because of the people in the organization, people like Steve Reich. People like Steve put the special in special operations. With men and women like him, you can accomplish any mission because he brought character, service, leadership, and achievement to everything we did. So the average day in the Army, you start early. Why? Just because that's what you do in the Army. You start early. And we would normally get up, and the first thing you do is we call PT, physical training or exercise. And so I'd normally run into Steve in the office at about 5:30 or 6 a.m. Steve would like to go running. In addition to all the sports you saw him playing, he was a marathon runner, ran under 3-hour marathons. And one day he said, hey, let's go running. I said, how far are we going to go? He said, well, we'll go 4 or 5 miles. I thought, okay, I could do that. Well, he meant 4 or 5 miles out, and you still had to come 4 or 5 miles back. So no more am I going to ever run with Steve Reich. I do remember one day, it was a beautiful day. It was clear, it was crystal blue, there was no humidity towards the end of the summer, and it was just that day that was different than all the preceding summer days. And I saw Steve in the office. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to go lift weights. He said he was going to go run. I said, have a good run. We did our thing, and we happened to get back to the office at about the same time, and somebody said, hey, come on in here. And we walked into the office, and we turned on the TV just in time to see the second plane hit the World Trade Center. Now, for those of you who remember that day, if you're old enough, you always will remember what you were doing and who you were with. And I was with Steve Reich, and we stood next to each other just watching that TV in awe. We knew our world was going to change. We didn't know how. It was unimaginable. I mean, who would have thought that a bunch of terrorists with box cutters would have taken over planes and flew them into the World Trade Center or the Pentagon? You wouldn't have been able to imagine that in 1,000 years. And Steve and I could not have imagined what our life was going to be like after that. We knew it was going to change. I realized most of the students here were somewhere between 2 or 5 years old when 9/11 occurred. And so your world since then has been sort of normal. Okay, there's long lines at the airport. Well, if you're in the military, you knew at some point you were going to go to combat. And you didn't know what that was like. You didn't know where, you didn't know when. Well, the 160th, we were alerted very quickly, and we left within days. And we went to Uzbekistan. And we started to do our homework. I'd never heard of Afghanistan. Okay, now, I'd heard of it. I knew the Russians fought there. They didn't do real well, and that was it. Didn't know it was the third poorest country in the world. Barely knew where it was on a map. Didn't know the geography. Didn't know the climate. Didn't know the people. Didn't know the government. Didn't know anything. Started learning very quickly. Tribal, the Taliban took over the government, instituted Sharia law, and I'm sorry if this is a history lesson, but it's important. And we started learning about Afghanistan. And so we went into Uzbekistan, just north of Afghanistan, very early into September of 2001. And we were prepared to conduct combat search and rescue into Afghanistan. It was about a 2.5-hour flight away, so a very far distance, once the United States determined that we were going to do air power, global power airstrikes to destroy Afghanistan infrastructure. Now, there really wasn't a lot of Afghanistan infrastructure. It was mud and brick buildings. So Steve and I got there. Steve became the assistant operations officer, and he was in charge at that time of running the TOC, planning, coordinating, controlling all the operations, coordinating with numerous agencies we had across the borders into Uzbekistan, and planning the mission. Now, when I say TOC, it's not like what you probably think of today when you watch a movie. You got a bunch of big TV screens and computers. Back then it was a bunch of us in a couple tents with radios and a stove to keep us warm. Very, very, very bare. So the air power strike started on October 7th, and on October 16th, we prepared to conduct the first mission into Afghanistan. It was infiltration of a small member of Army Special Forces and CIA to go link up with the Northern Alliance, who was the good Afghanis that were opposed to the Taliban, and help them with their effort to take back their country. Steve's leadership was in charge of running that operations center, coordinating, as I said, planning the mission, and then tracking it as the helicopters flew and coordinating any assistance they needed. I'll never forget, as I sat next to Steve, and we all sort of tried to stay out of the TOC. It was small, and at that point it was his TOC. He was running the show. And he had radios attached to him so he could talk on different radios. And at about that time, we knew it was supposed to land. We all walked in there, and you saw Steve talking on the radio, and he put that mic down and said, "Hey, we have American boots on the ground." Very emotional for all of us. Nearly 3,000 Americans lost their lives on September 11th, and we were all very proud to be a part of the response of our country. And I remember looking at Steve, and he was stoic. He was collected, he was calm, and I'm not sure what he was thinking. I know I was thinking, like, wow, what happens next? Well, what happened next was over about the next month and a half, we conducted a number of missions, all like that, very long range, and the Taliban were defeated very quickly. I thought, hey, we're good. Woohoo! We're going to go home. We've done our job. Taliban's defeated. Well, at that time, we sort of subscribed to the government's policy of you break it, you buy it. And the orders came down that we were going to move into Afghanistan in early December. So we had to split our force, and of course, the person we chose to be the commander and officer in charge of that element going into Bagram, Afghanistan, was Steve Reich, with about 70 soldiers and 4 helicopters. If you were really astute, you noticed some of those pictures. When it started, the first picture there, December '01, Steve had a beard and wearing civilian clothes. We were trying to fit in with the Northern Alliance, didn't want a large military presence. If you go to Bagram Air Base today, there's over 25,000 soldiers, airmen, Marines, civilians working there. Well, back then there was about 250. And that was 250 once Steve landed with his 60 or 70 soldiers. Very inhospitable. The reason he had a beard is because you couldn't shave. There was no running water, no food, no electricity. And the Russians, when they left there in the late 80s, left a great present. They left landmines all over the place. so you couldn't even walk off anywhere that was a hard cement because in danger of losing a leg. Steve quickly became what we call the mayor of Bagram. He ran that place. All these forces started flowing in, and I'm talking from the highest levels of the military, and the guy they would go to figure out where to go and who wanted what land and who wanted what resources and how you talked and how you got stuff done was Steve Reich. He was the mayor of Bagram. We actually created our own award for him called the Bagram Liberation Medal. That if you stayed there 30 days, you get presented this award by Steve Reich. So it was our sort of way of having humor. One of the most influential series of missions Steve was responsible for was into the Tora Bora, the White Mountains on the border of Pakistan, in January of 2002 when we first thought we had Osama bin Laden. Steve led a number of those missions into that harsh terrain to try to capture and kill Osama bin Laden and all the al-Qaeda fighters. Unfortunately, he escaped for the time being. Steve redeployed shortly after that and was given a command of a company in the 160th of the headquarters company. He was in charge of all the support. Very quickly, he deployed again, this time to Kandahar, down in southern Afghanistan. And once again, very quickly, he was no longer the mayor of Bagram. He was the mayor of Kandahar. He established our operations center there. And this time, he learned his lesson. He didn't like the tent that we had in Bagram. So he made friends with some engineers, and he built a big wooden structure, maybe half the size of this room. So we were much more comfortable our second winter in Afghanistan, thanks to Steve Reich's creativity and ingenuity. Steve then left that company command and went to Korea to be a platoon leader and an operational pilot in the 160th. Why did we have forces in Korea? Well, because we had to send them right back to Afghanistan because that war was still ramping up. Steve flew a number of missions in those years, and it was all over the world, from the Philippines. I think you saw some of those slides, back into Afghanistan, conducting a number of missions. Did that for about a year, and then in 2004, he was selected, promoted to major. You saw those pictures, and then he was given command of a flight company in the 160th, a number of helicopters and soldiers. And then he went right back to Afghanistan. Steve was a great company commander, like I said, natural leader. I'm not going to talk a lot about the events of June of 2005. There's really only one thing you need to know. And there was really only one thing that Steve knew that day. He knew that Americans were in trouble. Americans made a call for help in that mountain, and Steve knew what he had to do. He had to go rescue his comrades. Steve lived by an oath and a creed and character values. Never allow a comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy. Never surrender and never quit. And he would not leave people he knew on that mountain. And they knew when they called, Steve Reich would come get him at all costs. That's the kind of patriot, kind of man, kind of leader he was. The end of the slideshow, I think it may have got cut off today, but probably the greatest honor is there's 5 children named after Steve Reich. And I have an 8-year-old boy who I named in memory of Steve, because I want him to know every time he hears his name that he's named after a man of courage, a man of principle, a man who was a patriot, and a man who loved his country and would sacrifice his life to save another. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning. I would like to welcome you here today and thank you for joining us for the presentation of the Stephen Reich Memorial Award. And I would like to thank Colonel Mike Hertzendorf for taking the time to be with us here today. This award is given annually to a Shepaug student in recognition of their character, service, leadership, and achievement. The purpose of this award is to remember and to honor Stephen Reich and his life of service and sacrifice for our country. The The purpose of this award is also to recognize and honor one of our own students and the promise they have shown. As we look forward to a 3-day weekend, let us be reminded of its true meaning. Monday is Memorial Day, a time when we can take a moment to remember and to give thanks to all of our servicemen and women, past and present. Let us remember the freedom we enjoy and often take for granted has been secured by the selfless service of so many who have served our nation. We are very fortunate to be able to call this area home, this community, and this school. Stephen recognized this, and he always looked forward to returning here, visit family, hike the trails in Steep Rock. And although he was deployed around the world, and he was stationed around the country, whether it was Savannah or in Kentucky, he always considered this to be home. I can remember one of those trips. He called and asked if I wanted to go for a hike in Steep Rock with him and his sisters. And I can't remember exactly when, and maybe Anne-Marie and Megan can fill me in later, but I don't remember exactly when it was. But we were going to hike to the top of the Clamshell, a place that I'm sure many of you are familiar with as well. So we parked at the riding ring and set out. He immediately led us up a trail that had the least direct path to our destination, and therefore the path less traveled. And my first thought as we started out was, all right, this is going to take a while. There's very few trails in Steep Rock I have not been on, but this was the first time for me on this particular trail. And as we're walking and talking, catching up on what we'd missed in the months since we last saw each other, it struck me that this wasn't about getting to the top of the Clamshell. That's where we were heading, but it wasn't about the destination. It was about the journey. And that's how it was with Stephen. It was never about where he was going, but what he was doing along the way. And this is certainly evident in this slideshow with all the pictures of all the places that he traveled and visited. We could have taken a more direct path and gotten there faster, but that wasn't the idea. This was a chance for him to leave behind the responsibilities he carried, a chance to catch up with his sisters and a friend, a chance to spend some time together in a place where time didn't matter. I've often thought about that day and how it seemed to be so reflective of his life. That day was a reflection of Stephen in the sense he never set out to earn the accolades he received. He didn't set out to attain a desired rank in the Army. His goal was to do things the right way and to make the most of his journey. It wasn't about what would be the quickest route to where he wanted to go. It was about how he lived and the relationships he was able to forge along the way. Whether he was a student here at Shepaug, a cadet at West Point, or an officer in the Army, he focused on doing things right. He had goals and aspirations, but he was able to recognize the process was far more important than the result. And he knew that if he did the little things right, if he paid attention to the details along the way, he would put himself in position to reach his goals. I believe this is part of what made Stephen such an effective leader. He knew that to achieve desired results, doing things the right way and paying attention to details mattered. And think about that. When you see someone who is talented and successful, taking care to do things right all the time, it inspires you to do the same. He combined this with genuine compassion for those around him, and through this he earned trust and respect. He cared so deeply for his family and friends, for his community and his country, that he dedicated his life to service. We are very fortunate to live in this community and in this great country, and Stephen was well aware of this. And although we remember Stephen here today, he would be uncomfortable thinking that this is all about him. But by remembering one of our own, we can remember all who served and all who sacrificed for our country. We are free to worship in whatever manner we choose, free to have an education some are denied, and free from fear. We are free to take a hike in Steep Rock, to put aside our responsibilities, even if only for a short time, to enjoy what we are so lucky to have around us. So let us remember and be grateful on Memorial Day for the sacrifice and service of so many in the preservation of our freedom. This time, I'd like to ask Anne-Marie Latanzi, Stephen's youngest sister, to join me to present the award. recipient of this award is described by Mrs. Youngblood as an ethically strong, intellectually curious, and very kind young woman. Senor Nolan went on to say how this student exemplifies good character and does the right thing at all times. He praised her attention to detail and ability to lead. And he goes on to say, it's all done with humility, as she never seeks praise or recognition for her work. So we are proud to announce the 2014 Stephen Reich Memorial Award to Emily. That close. Emily Chin.
Congratulations to Emily. Thank you all for coming and making this a special day for everybody involved. Have a great day. I believe, students, you are off to period 4. Thank you.